world wants to rinse their robes. Do you want to rinse your robe? I don't even have a robe, and I don't know why it would need rinsed. Does it need rinsed in blood? I suppose in the book of Revelation it does, so that it may become clean, may become washed, because in the circumcision evangel you become washed by suffering trials. I'm referencing, of course, Revelation chapter 22 and verse 14. Welcome to the Revelation series. I'm Martin Zender, of course, your host, and to this extravaganza. We've been on this course now since September of 2014, and we're about finished. Am I glad about that? Yes. But will I leave before I exhaust everything I need to say about this topic? No, I will not. Verse 14, Revelation 22. John is now recapping. He has been on this trip. He has been to the third earth. He has seen the New Jerusalem coming out. He has solved all the problems and all the riddles and all the unfinished business of Genesis. And Revelation is satisfying in that way. It's not so satisfying in that we have the consummation of all things, because this is a good time to say this. Revelation is not the farthest look we have into prophetic history. No, that would be 1 Corinthians chapter 15. Maybe I need to explain this to you, because people think that because Revelation is the last book of the Bible, therefore it's the last thing God has to say. But it's not. I will remind you of some things that are still problematic in Revelation, as great as it is, as nice and consummating as it is in relation to those things begun in Genesis. We still have a wall. John talks about the New Jerusalem with a wall huge and high, and the walls surround the city. And that sounds great. Oh, it's protected. It's great. But there's still a wall, isn't there? Now, in this day and age, we need walls. We need walls between countries. As a matter of fact, today, you need a wall in your house to protect you from the elements and to protect you from criminal elements, meteorological and criminal elements. Once you get into your house, that is not good. Same with the country. The country is just one big house. So, but walls speak of distance. Walls do speak of safety, but it also speaks of hazards from without. But in the New Jerusalem on the new earth, it's not so much hazards from without. It's just containing God in the city. People still come into the city and they worship God. But it's not an ideal situation. But when God is, it's pretty damn close to being ideal, but it's not. But when God becomes all in all, 1 Corinthians 15:28, then God becomes everything and everybody, and there are no distinctions at all. There aren't even any kings. Remember, I told you Israel reigns as kings and priests in the 1,000 years. They retire their priesthood on the new earth, which is Aeon 5, as compared to the 1,000 years, which is Aeon 4, because in that New Jerusalem there is no temple. Therefore, there is no priesthood, because God himself dwells with humanity. You have instant access to the man himself. Sorry for using a figure of speech known as anthropomorphia there, but I thought it was appropriate. There will come a time when there will be no walls, there will be not even any kings, not a kingdom. There won't be a kingdom. People stumble at this. There's a verse that says the saints rule, and the Israel saints, they rule forever and ever. Well, that proves, doesn't it, Martin, that forever and ever means eternity? No. The proper translation across the board is for the eons of the eons. The saints only reign, including us, not just Israel saints, including us. We only reign for the eons of the eons. Because if we reign for eternity, that presupposes in subjection. You reign over people who are subject to you, or who need to be subject to you. You need to keep them in line by some means or another. But Jesus Christ and his saints reign so perfectly during the Aeonian times, during the eons of the eons. God knows we're not reigning now. That the need for reign is abolished. There's no more need to reign over people, because God is all in all. Everyone is in perfect harmony with everyone else, and in perfect harmony with God. To suppose that you need someone to reign over you for eternity, that presupposes an imperfect arrangement. It's an insult to Christ, a slap in his face to say that he reigns forever and ever. Jesus Christ reigns until he takes all enemies under his feet. This is 1 Corinthians chapter 15. Paul talks about the consummation. Consummation of what? The eons. In Revelation, we're still looking at the glorious details of Eon 5. As great as it is, I'm going to show you there are still people in the second death. There are still those who are not perfected. This is not an ideal situation. Paul goes beyond Revelation. And the reason this tricks people, God does this on purpose so that you have to seek. People think that Revelation is the last book in the Bible chronologically. I mean, not chronologically, but pagelogically in the book as it's laid out traditionally. And it might even have been the last book written chronologically. I don't care. It doesn't matter. It's circumcision. And I told you it's circumcision down the line. There's no Paul in here. So it only deals with truths regarding the circumcision. John's not sneaking in a little vignette view of the snatching away in Revelation 12. Circumcision down the line. But that doesn't mean that a letter written even earlier containing a different message, a different evangel to a different people with a different destiny, namely Paul's writings, doesn't mean that they can't look beyond what Revelation is looking to, and indeed they do. They look to it and through it, beyond Revelation. Now, I might say this as a PS, a little addition here, that Paul does mention the circumcision. Paul talks about the circumcision all the time, but you won't find it the other way around. Circumcision doesn't talk about Paul. They might mention Paul. Peter mentions Paul in one of his letters. Some of the things Paul says are hard to understand. That's a far cry from delving into details of his evangel. It's not it at all. Not it at all. Already talked about that. So Revelation is limited. Glorious, especially when we get to Eon 5 and the new earth and the new Jerusalem, but limited. Paul goes beyond Eon 5. He goes into the consummation of Eon 5, when Jesus Christ actually gives up his rule and his reign. He gives it up. Because look, I might as well just go ahead and read here, because I want to show you, I'll go to 1 Corinthians 15. I want to show you that, I'm going to get back to that robe rinsing business. I got that from verse 14. I started to show, I don't want to rinse my robe. I don't have a robe. I think it's audacious for people to have robes today. Choir people have robes. That's okay in a high school choir, I guess. I can handle it in a high school choir because there are no religious overtones. Like that we are dressed. It's an assumption. It's a presumption that you're a saint. That if you're in church with a robe, you have problems. I don't care if you're the frickin' priest. I don't care if you're the choir. You have robes. It's just so pretentious, so presumptuous. Because they get that, I guess, from Revelation, rinsing your robes. And if I have a robe, I must be a saint. No, if you have a robe in this day and age, you're a poser. If you have a robe in that day and age, Revelation 22, the age upcoming, yes, you're not a poser. You've rinsed your robe in blood. It's now clean. We're already clean. We don't need to rinse any robes. We don't have robes. We're declared righteous by Jesus Christ, and it has nothing to do with what you're wearing, even in figure. There's no special garments. There's no vesture. But Martin, in the Israel calling, the priests were all decked out. God told them what they had to wear. They had to have the linen. They had to have the linen ephod. They had to have the breastplate with the 12 gems. I know about all that. That's a legitimate religious exercise, a demonstration. It was all symbolic. There was meaning to all those gems on the breastplate. There was meaning to the linen. They wouldn't sweat. They're not to work when they're in God's presence. God does all the work. But that's Israel. That's a calling that mixes law and grace. And so you do have to produce certain things, and you have to rinse your robe. You have to go through trials. You have to sweat a little bit. You have to be a little bit guilty. You have to be a little bit worthy. You have to confess your sins. All this stuff. And yet, it's interesting that Paul relates us to Adam. And when Adam was created, what was he wearing? When Adam was created, what was he wearing? Same thing I wear when I go to bed every night. Nothing. I'm Adamic. I'm so Adamic when I go to bed at night. I don't need any of these robe business. What is this people wearing nightshirts? Like Scrooge wears a nightshirt. You might as well just carry a candle around if you're going to wear a nightshirt. You wear shirts all day. What are you doing wearing a shirt at night? This clothing thing, this extra protection, this one step removed from being pure, unadulterated yourself before God, as God made you, the way they say it. That's a good phrase. What do you wear at night? I dress as God made me. God made Adam naked. And it is a picture of a spiritual truth that really flies in the face of this robe business. Happy are those who are rinsing their robes, that it will be their license to the log of life. You have to have a license to go to the log of life, to eat of the trees of the log of life, just to see the log of life, to be around where the log of life is. Where's your license? Right here. Where's your robe? I'm wearing it. It's rinsed. It's been rinsed by blood. It's been made white and pure. Downy fabric softener, bleach, whatever you like. I got it. That's just when you realize, well, that sounds really great. You realize that we're justified by faith apart from robes. Yeah, I just paraphrased Paul in Romans chapter 3. We're justified by faith apart from works of law. We're justified by faith apart from wardrobe. You hear that word in there? Robe, wardrobe. The saints want to rinse their robes, and they anticipate it by wearing robes in their church buildings, as though it's special. Well, it's legit in Revelation, but it's presumptuous now. Just wear anything. If you have to go to church, just go. I don't want you to go. I'd rather you not, but on top of it, you wear a robe? What the hell is going on here? This. People are wannabe Israelites. They're trying to recreate the greatness of the tabernacle system, where people trembled to death to enter into the holy place once a year, where people hoped that they brought the right sacrifice at the right time, where people hoped that they had confessed all their sins, where they hoped that the priest didn't drop dead in the holy place, the Holy of Holies, because he spilled a bead of sweat that dripped from his forehead off the end of his nose, because he wasn't wearing linen. Those are your hopes and dreams. If you're reading Revelation and seeing a great thing about the walls of the city, the robes of the saints being rinsed, eating of the log of life, oh great. It's going to be a great thing on the New Jerusalem, in the New Jerusalem, to eat from the log of life, to eat of the trees, to see that river resplendent as crystal. Going to be a great thing. But we don't need to eat anything where we're going. We don't need to eat. Our bodies will be suffused with spirit, and our bodies will not be like the bodies of these saints who are showing off their robes. I seem to be dissing it. I seem to be belittling it. I'm not. I'm just saying, why would you drool over this, lust after this, when what we have is even better? Nakedness. That's even better. Because you have nothing to offer God. You don't have a robe. You don't have it rinsed in blood or bleach. You have no confidence in the flesh whatsoever, because you're a new creation. You're not reformed. You're created anew from scratch. We've erased the old Adam. And a token of that is the naked human body, which I will now demonstrate. Just kidding. So, entering into the portals of the city sounds great here. Let's go on. Their license to the tree, the log of life, that they may be entering the portals into the city sounds great, until you realize that a portal presupposes a wall, and you go through the wall into a city to enter the presence of God. We're already in the presence of God. Ephesians 2, or is it 3? We have access with confidence to the Father by virtue of Jesus Christ's sacrifice on the cross on our behalf. He's the one who shed his robe, his garments. They gambled for his garments. They divided them, the Roman soldiers did, among themselves. His garments were rinsed in blood, so that ours don't have to be. The circumcision knew nothing about his example on the cross. Really, as I've told you many times, they had no explanation for why he was tortured for 6 hours. It didn't answer any of the Old Testament types concerning the Lamb. So there was more going on there at the cross than Jesus dying for one little nation in the Middle East. It was for all humanity and for the entire universe, for sovereignties, authorities, and world mights among the celestials, for Satan himself. Nobody knew that. This in Revelation has nothing to do with that. And by the way, verse 15, outside, that is outside the city, are curs and enchanters and paramours and murderers and idolaters and everyone fabricating and fondling falsehood. Oh, isn't this a lovely thing to bring up at the end of Revelation in chapter 22? What kind of perfection do we have here? Now, I must tell you this. I said this before. They're out. They're not outside. If you look at the word outside in the Concordant version, you see that the out is in dark face type. The side is in light face type, meaning side has been added to the text. I don't even know why the Concordant version added it. Just leave it out. And if you do, you just have, and out are the curs. They're just out. It's not like they're outside banging on the doors to get in. It sounds like outside are curs and enchanters and paramours. It sounds like they're just banging on the doors like those heinous spirits did in Sodom and Gomorrah. It's not the case. They're not outside the door. They're not geographically out. They're just out. They're not there. Where are they? Read Revelation 20. The writer here, John, is assuming you've read Revelation 20 before you get to Revelation 22. They're in the lake of fire, which is what? Revelation 20:14, the second death. Speaking of death, that brings me back to 1 Corinthians 15. I told you that Paul's message is more far-reaching, even though it might have been written chronologically before the unveiling of Jesus Christ, and certainly it's bound in the book itself physically before Revelation, but that doesn't matter because Paul is a different animal. He's a different breed. He's of a different message. He's of a different gospel to a different people with a different destiny. It's called the gospel of the uncircumcision. And as great as you might think it is that Israel is ruling as kings on the new earth, we read in 1 Corinthians 15, verse 24, that the purpose of Christ is whenever he may be giving up the kingdom. He's going to give up the kingdom to his God and Father. Give it up. Why would he do that? It's so precious. How precious is it when, again, it presupposes in subjection? And in subjection is not a hallmark of a perfect universe. There's room for improvement, and there will be improvement. There will be no more kingdom. There will be no more kingdom. Because all will be in subjection to Christ, and you don't need a king anymore. You still have a Savior. You still have a Son of God. You still have, was it Luke 1:33? Of his kingdom there shall be no consummation. It doesn't say his kingdom will have no consummation. Of his kingdom. Those things produced by the kingdom. When the kingdom was functioning during eons 4 and 5, of that, the fruit of it will not go away. Just like the fruit of our learning experience, as we've been dipped into the waters of contrast, of good and evil, what we've learned will not go away. The evil will go away. The sorry end of those contrasts will go away. But what we learn, that is the fruit of the contrast, there is no consummation. Of the contrast we've been through, of the trials. The things produced by them. The trials go away. The death goes away. The sin goes away. The evil goes away. But what we've learned from it doesn't go away. For he must be reigning until, yes, let's go to I'm in verse 24 of 1 Corinthians 15. He may be giving up the kingdom to his God and Father whenever he should be nullifying all sovereignty and all authority and power, for he must be reigning until. The King James has no answer for this. In fact, the King James Version contradicts itself because they translate this correctly. He must be reigning until he should be placing all enemies under his feet. The last enemy is being abolished, death. In another place, they have Christ reigning forever and ever. Which is it? Does he reign forever and ever, or does he reign until he doesn't reign anymore. The solution to this apparent difficulty, apparent contradiction, nothing contradicts itself, any properly translated word, is the translation forever and ever, which ought to be for the eons of the eons. He reigns for the eons of the eons. Paul here in 1 Corinthians 15 is talking about a time when the eons consummate. That is, when the eons finish. There's a purpose to the eons. The purpose of the eons, Ephesians 3:11. These eons will consummate in satisfaction to everyone. He should be reigning until he should be placing all enemies under his feet. The last enemy abolishes death. As I'm reading to you now at the end of Revelation chapter 22, death is still in existence. It's relegated to the second death. The only death existent is the second death, but we're just reading at the end of this. What a buzzkill here. At the end of Revelation 22, there are curs, enchanters, paramours, adulterers, whatever. They're out. They're not in the kingdom. Where are they? In the lake of fire. What's the lake of fire? Revelation 20:14. It's the second death. We're just not saying much about it in Revelation 22. Thought we'd mention it for a happy little end note here. But we're not mentioning it very much because we're trying to describe the glories. But the glories are eclipsed. The glories of Revelation 22 are eclipsed by Paul in 1 Corinthians 15. And the last enemy is being abolished, death, for he subjects all under his feet. Now, whenever he may be saying that all is subject, it is evident that it is outside of him, that is God, who subjects all to him. Christ subjects everything, but God can't subject God because he himself is subject to God. That's what this is saying very convolutedly. You have to follow the pronouns here. Now, whenever he may be saying that all is subject, it is evident it is outside of him who subjects all to him. Now, whenever all may be subjected to him, that is God, then the Son himself also shall be subjected to him. That is God, who subjects all to him, that God may be all in all. You just got to follow the pronouns. God will be all in all. This has not yet happened in Revelation 22, as great as it is. Paul's gospel, distinct from the unveiling of Jesus Christ, goes to the consummation of the eons, when even rule itself is abolished, and the last enemy, death, is abolished. And if death is abolished, it stands to reason. And it's self-evident. And yet I pointed out, when death is abolished, there is to be nothing else, and there will be nothing else left but life.